So let's talk about that for a minute, because this has been a big piece of your daily job for the last year, as I've witnessed. You know, a lot of our clients, you know, a year ago started having these questions, and we tried to, you know, make everybody feel comfortable that they're with the right company, because we have our finger on the pulse of this. I've watched you read the annual book, you know, every year for as many years as I can remember, and you always say, like, who reads all this? Who understands all this? Well, that's you at CBTG, and then you train your team below you. But a lot of them come to us this year, and it's obviously a little more of a pressing matter, because CMMC is, it's more difficult, it's more technical than a lot of what we've done in the past. So let's talk about scoring people and audits and what your process has been through that.
Well, we would go in and do an assessment. Basically, you start with NIST, the whole world. Everything in security starts at NIST, government recommendations. So there's 110 questions that you have to answer and have to be compliant with. That's your base score. 110 is where you want to be. That's fully compliant.
How many people are there?
Not a lot.
Yeah.
So obviously CMMC was a recommendation for the longest time. The government's had the standard out for a while. Over the last couple of years, obviously a lot of things have happened at government contractors, supply chain hacks, things like that, so they have to tighten up. So they're tightening up, said we're going to spend 2 years figuring out a new CMMC standard, and then we're going to push it down and everybody's got to be compliant. And when they redid CMMC, they took NIST and they added more scores to each of the questions. They weighted them, so some are acceptable to be lax on and some are not. They also took away the self-certification. CMMC used to be, we would go in, we would do the NIST assessment, we would do the CMMC scoring, and then we would come up with a thing and say, okay, you're certified for the year. And that was acceptable. Now it's not. Has to be a third party. The published CMMC guidelines for financial for business is to expect around $300,000 for a large business and about $80,000 for a small business to become compliant.
That's a scary budget. You know,
It's a very scary budget, which is why they pushed the date 3 times.
And it's been difficult, you know, in the MSP world, because a lot of times we're the messenger of that not so great news. You know, we've had a lot of meetings with clients over the years of how to get them there and how to do it in a logical progression, because, you know, a lot of it is, you know, you need better hardware, you need things that are within contracts from the particular manufacturer, you know, have support on them, aren't past a certain, you know, age, and other protocols. They have, you know, physical security is becoming a piece of it. So again, like, if you hadn't done a lot in the past, or hadn't done enough in the past, and then all of a sudden you have to swallow this big pill, it's a whole lot. So what we've worked to do is try to be ahead of it as far ahead of it as possible. Sometimes that first score scares clients, and they're surprised that, you know, they come to us and say, hey, we don't know where we are. We found your name on a site as a company that does well with this, and we'll score them, and they're like, oh wow, you know, that's pretty low. And then our job is to say, okay, well, here's the easy ones to fix, and that'll bring your score up a lot, right? Because you just weren't doing something right. That's an easy tweak. And here's the things that are harder are going to cost you more. And let's budget for that 6 months from now, because you're still going to be ahead of the date. That's if they don't move it again. You know, earlier in the year we had those discussions. So we've done our best to mitigate that. There's also for different. In manufacturing specifically, there's also different grants from the state that we've been able to point people out that helps to keep some of those costs down, or reclaim some of those costs anyway for new hardware.
Well, we have a medium and small business group of customers here, right? So we've created sets that can be financially feasible to get a smaller business certified, right? Because if you have, let's say you have a small manufacturing company in Connecticut, 10, 15 people, you know, you're not going to have 80 grand to drop right off the top.
Absolutely not.
And you're certainly not going to want to be in a contract with these top of the line made for enterprise products, right? Which is what they're going to recommend. But we put together packages for people based on the ability to get them certified with the least amount of disruption and a reasonable cost. right? Cost is not the factor, because if cost is the factor, you're not going to get decent security.
True.
But you have to work out the balance between what a small manufacturing company would be able to afford and what products will meet their requirements versus just saying, hey, everybody's got to use these enterprise products that a Pratt & Whitney uses.
Yeah.
And that's just not feasible for some customers. But we are able to work that out so that the customers end up in a situation where they meet all the requirements necessary and they don't have to take a huge burden of how am I going to pay for this thing.
And what that's looked like on our side for some of the product sets would be that we actually have had to break it off into like a two-pronged attack, right? So for a small and mid-sized business, maybe privately owned, that wants to have, managed SOC, we have a product that is checks the boxes and is cost effective for them. And then for a higher level, aerospace firm, of which we have a few with hundreds of employees that are dealing direct with the government, well, they need a higher level managed SOC. And guess what? That costs 5 times as much, but we have that on the menu as well. So it's
the
been
supply
important
chain is broken into 3 tiers. There's a tier 1 supplier which talks directly or works directly with the DoD or the Department of Energy. And then there's a tier 2 supplier, which is probably a company that would fall in our wheelhouse, right? They produce products, they give them or sell them to a company like Pratt & Whitney or Rolls-Royce or Lockheed Martin. And those are the tier 1s, so they have a stricter set of requirements. But as it goes down the supply chain, these people have requirements that they have to insist that people below them follow. So our customers fall in the tier 2 section of that. So CMMC 2 is where most of our customers in the manufacturing space have to be. And those are required audits. So it's not like you can say, okay, well, I'll just self-certify me this year.
Right. You'll end up losing contracts next year is how this is going to go.
They are prevented from actually giving contracts to people who have low SPAR score. So a SPAR score is your NIST controls, the 110. They have to be reported to the government in a portal. And it's abbreviated SPARs. I don't know exactly what there's so many acronyms. I don't know what the term specifically means, but yeah, you have to report those every year to the government, and those are what they base your contracts on. And if you're in a competitive situation for a government contract or as a supplier to a tier 1 provider, then they will look at that SPAR score as one of the deciding factors. So somebody with a 109 will beat out somebody with a 106 score for a contract. And these didn't used to be as heavily weighted as they are now, but because of all the supply chain attacks, this is a major factor in winning bids. So the closer to 110 or at 110, if you have to be CMMC certified at level 2 or greater, 110 is your score. You gotta have it or you're gonna start losing business.